So I guess that was your wife I was just talking to. Okay, and she kind of rattled off some of her concerns. So what are your big concerns? Pretty much the same thing, or?
Oh, I've got a different. Everybody's out here for their own reasons, but it's. I think we're ultimately coming together with an understanding of what the systemic problems are from all of our individual reasons. I mean, I have, of course, run into problems with our current debt system. I had somebody try to illegally collect an $8,000 debt for a repossessed car from me, and fortunately, by working my way through the court system and through appropriate processes, I was able to prove with some certainty that, in fact, I did not owe that debt. But I mean, you have systemic problems where somebody thinks that just because they tell you you owe them $8,000 that you're going to cave and pay them $8,000 that you don't properly owe.
Your wife mentioned the bailout of the banks, and I hear that from a lot of people, the bailout of the banks. And actually, to me, I don't blame the banks for taking the bailouts. I blame the politicians who gave them the bailout money. How do you feel about the politicians? Specifically, Barack Obama was one who favored the bailouts.
I mean, ultimately, the bailouts were systemically enabled by ongoing systems. I feel that your question might be slightly leading, but
I was going to say any politician. I mean, it wasn't just Barack Obama. I'm just he's just the big cheese right now.
Well, he was the guy who's in the office at the time. I mean, we certainly had the structure for the bailouts set up by even people as far back as Reagan.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, actually, the first bailout that I remember was actually September 2008 when Bush was president. That was the whatever $800 billion TARP bailout back then. So, but even back then, as a senator, Obama supported it.
Well, and certainly, there's. I'm not 100% convinced that our representative system is actually providing useful representation. A good portion of what one of the underlying concerns is that the 99% represent under 50% of the current actual representatives in Congress and in our legislative bodies, and that's a concern, and that should be a concern for everybody, because honestly, once somebody passes a certain income threshold, their expectations of the world change from what everyone else has to contend with.
Well, what do you think that income level is?
I'd postulate that it's probably around the I think it's fairly granular depending on your area of the nation. Certainly around 500,000, you start getting questions, you start getting an underlying concern that perhaps what they perceive as their difficulties and obstacles are so out of touch with what everyone else perceives as their difficulties and obstacles that you can't clearly say that there's a clean parallel, and you can't clearly say that there's accurate representation.
All right, let me just ask a couple of more questions here. In the past, politically, how have you tended to vote? Democrat, Republican, back and forth, independent?
I'm fairly comfortable stating myself as an independent. I've voted for third parties in general elections as essentially, to a certain extent, I've voted on issues, but then again, every voter's slightly guilty of that.
Of all the candidates who have announced for president next year, which one do you think you would be most likely to support right now? Any of them or none of the above?
I have yet to make a decision that I would be comfortable on that with. So I think if I had to choose any of those, none of the above would be where I currently stood.
Well, I was going to say all I know of right now is Barack Obama on the one side and a bunch of Republicans. So
Yeah.
Out of that batch. I guess you say none of the above. Is that
Right. I haven't been impressed with anything coming out of the Republican debates. They aren't speaking to me, and they aren't speaking to my needs.
How about Ron Paul, Gary Johnson?
I've looked at Ron Paul and Gary Johnson, and I've seen points of their platform that I could theoretically respect. However, I think more important to me are their stances on underlying social concerns. Anyone who's currently jockeying for consideration of running under the Republican ticket, I'm concerned would have to pander to the religious right. And there are certain things that the religious right holds as important to them that I cannot back.
Okay, thanks for talking to me. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right.